Hey guys, it's an election season. St. George City elections are the most important thing. We want you to go to votestg.com and find out who's running and what they stand for. See us all over Southern Utah in our voter information booth. We'll be at Digby's Market, Red Rock Bicycles, and the park. We'll see you out there. Hey everybody. Welcome back to the 435 podcast. We have an In the Running segment with United States Congressional candidate Celeste Maloy. It was a great interview. We talked about why she's running and what she's willing to fight for us in this district. We hope you enjoy it. We talked overreach, governmental overreach, overspending, and what she wants to do to help us protect our lands and control over our local, what's important to us locally here in St. George. So enjoy this episode. I hope you get some more information about her. Make sure you go to votestg.com to find out more information, not only about her, but the candidate she's running against, and also the St. George City Council members. We're getting out the vote. We're rocking the vote. Votestg.com to find out more. Her website, celeste4utah.com, if you want more information about her. We hope you enjoy this episode. We'll see you out there, guys. I watched the whole thing. I was really, really impressed by Jordan Hess.
Yeah.
Really impressed with his answers.
He's a great debater.
He's a great debater, but he's also succinct, and he knew what he was saying. He didn't seem overly polished, right? It didn't seem like he had like this prepared statement off of every question. It seemed like it was just coming out naturally. But the same thing, I got the same feeling from you. But when you didn't stand up and you were just a matter of fact, I liked that you set yourself apart in that. I was like, I really liked that. I thought that was I don't know if that was conscious. Or you're like, my knee was hurt. I hurt my knee.
No, everybody's had strong opinions about me not standing in that first debate. I have had more calls and comments about that than anything I've done on the campaign trail. But I'll tell you the actual reason.
Okay.
I was wearing a dress and they had us on 6-foot tall stools. I'm 5'5". So once I got on that stool, I thought I kind of need to stay there, because if I'm getting up and down all the time in a skirt,
trying to move.
I need people listening to my answers and not have a wardrobe malfunction. So I just stayed where I was.
Well, I think you did a great job. I think you did a great job. And then I didn't get to watch the debate when they came down here. I couldn't find it for whatever reason. And then I was like, well, I listened to the first one, and then the results were in anyway. So I didn't go too much more into listening to that, but I have been listening to a few of the debates that you've been doing with Bruce.
Yeah.
You invited Becky. Is she gonna come to any of them?
She hasn't responded to me, but the Deseret News said that she's not coming to any of them. I assume they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. It's a strategy that has worked for other politicians, where you just don't have to talk very much and you rely on name recognition, which is probably that's the angles she's taking. But I haven't seen her down here at all. So I think she's been down here once or twice, at least down here in Southern Utah. But
I did run into her down here at an event one weekend.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I needed to grab a drink. So you've been doing debates and been all over the state recently.
Well, all over the district, not all over the state.
All over the district, but from north all the way to south, right? Because that district is vast, right? Yeah. So you've been driving around a lot. This is your first campaign?
Yes.
Okay. And how is it going? How many more days till the primary are we at? I think we're at like, the ballots.
It's 4 weeks.
Yeah, ballots are coming out on the 17th of August, and you got 4 weeks left till September 5th.
Yes.
And how you doing? Are you still energized?
I am.
You are.
I'm not getting as much sleep as, the medical community would recommend.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's important to get out and talk to everybody and get to all the parts of the district. And I like road tripping. I like driving around the district. I like being everywhere. Yeah. But the part I really, really like is standing in front of people and talking about policy and answering policy questions. Yeah. I don't think anybody likes fundraising. That's a necessary evil.
Yeah. Especially for the congressional seats.
Yeah.
Because you're running kind of on a regular basis, right? Yeah.
Well, and I mean, there's a picture of the district. In order to get your message out everywhere, it does take some money. Yeah. But my favorite way to campaign is to get in front of a group of people, tell them my story, and let them ask questions. I just think it's a really good way for people to figure out who I am and what it is I care about, and a good way for me to hear from them what their concerns are and address them directly.
Yeah. Well, the story that jumped out to me when I went to the last event that we did, it was the part where you were working before you worked with Chris Stewart, before he invited you to work with him specifically. Will you take us through, like, you were working at the Water Conservancy District here at the county?
Yeah.
And then how did you get with Chris Stewart and then get to where you are today? Will you kind of recap that part of the story? Because we can go all the way back to like your childhood, but let's skip forward.
This isn't therapy. You don't need to hear everything about my childhood.
No. But that was that portion of that story. I was like, oh man, that actually, it tells, I think it said a lot about you and where you've been.
So I'm guessing you're talking about right after I finished law school.
Right.
So when I graduated from law school, I moved here to St. George, and I went to work for the county attorney's office.
Okay.
I was a deputy county attorney, civil attorney, and they hired me to write a county plan. But I got here about the same time that the Bureau of Land Management here in Washington County released their draft resource management plan for all of the BLM land in Washington
See,
County.
I got it way wrong. The Water Conservancy, the BLM land. That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I did work for the Water Conservancy, but it was after that.
Right. Okay.
So I've told this story a lot of times. I apologize to any of your listeners who've already heard it, but it is an important story for why I'm here.
Yeah.
Before that, I'd been really frustrated with federal policy, and I felt like they just didn't take input from the people who were impacted by it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the agencies write these policies and they open them for comment, and then it just seemed like they always got implemented exactly the way they were written, and the comment period didn't matter.
Yeah.
But that time, it landed on my desk, and the county attorney said, have a look at this plan. Let me know if there's anything in there that the county should be concerned about. And there were a lot of things in there the county should be concerned about.
Yeah.
And he asked me, okay, what are we going to do? And I suddenly had to figure out how to make a difference in that plan, because there were things in there that really would have been hugely problematic if they'd have been implemented the way they were written. And it was open for comment. It was a draft plan. So I took all of the notes that I had made on that plan that I thought were problematic and made them into a PowerPoint. And I went all over the county talking to people, just trying to get people to comment, telling people, this is what's in this plan, and these are the impacts it'll have on this county. Mm-hmm. You need to go comment. We need to get a landslide of comments into the BLM to see if we can change some of the things in this plan. And because of all of the work we were doing and getting the word out, eventually the BLM started talking to us while it was still a draft plan and saying, hey, you're out there saying all these things are in the plan. Let's start talking about it. And by sitting down with them, and by knowing what was in the plan, and by knowing what was in their manuals, and by knowing the laws, and I'd done my research, and I didn't do it by myself. I had help.
Yeah.
But we actually got a lot of the things in that plan changed. And I tell people all the time, that's when I got hooked on policy work. That's when I realized how important it is to do the policy work. I'd spent a lot of time looking at plans that were already implemented and railing against what was in them. But being able to change it before it got implemented was a huge sea change for me in my career.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been involved in policy work. I worked I stayed on with the county attorney's office and did a lot of public lands work for the county. I went to work for the Utah Association of Counties part-time at the same time, and did public lands policy for all of the counties in the state.
Okay.
Which means I got to have my fingers in everything that was going on in the state, public lands wise. And that was a great experience for me. And I did eventually.
And when we talk about public lands, right, we're talking about energy infrastructure. We're talking about resource management. We're talking about transportation.
Yep.
We're talking about what else? What else am I missing? Oh, I guess water management is going to be lumped into that, right?
Yeah. Well, and even growth. So Washington County is growing. Everybody knows that. Washington County has been growing for a long time. In order for Washington County to keep growing, we've got to have good federal land management.
Well, and this blew my mind. So I moved here in 2015 from California.
Okay.
And Joe Boca was a city council member.
Yeah.
And the Love Like Joe golf tournament is coming up on August 31st, by the way. So if you want to donate to one of the best charities, and Joe Boca was one of the best humans.
He was a good friend of mine, and I love that you just plugged his tournament.
Yeah, he's a guy that I aspire to be like, right?
So do I.
And so he came into a real estate. We were just meeting. I was a real estate agent, didn't know anything about anything, but he told me that 11% of the county is privately owned, and that blew my mind. When you look at the county on a map and you look at how much land is managed by the federal government, then at the state level, majority of it at the federal level.
Yeah.
We're restricted when it comes to water resources. That's an obvious thing. But the restriction on land really changes quality of life and the way we grow, because there's so many people here that want to keep it a small town, right? Like until I-15, went through their gorge, we're talking to the 70s, nothing changed. I remember talking to one of the families in Santa Clara, and he said from basically, 1910 until 1960, the population didn't change in Santa Clara. It was the exact same. It's like the same people were living there. They never changed the population sign. So, looking at how important like the federal land management is, especially to Washington County, I think it's really important. And then your role in that, I think you'd be a great voice from what I know so far, right? Is that I think you'd be a great voice at understanding some of these dynamics that somebody from the outside, like me, if I was just, running as a candidate, if I just if I was a business owner and I might be smart in, making money or growing jobs, there's some fundamental understanding of the livelihood of rural towns that needs a kind of your perspective, at least is what I've seen so far. So,
well, I definitely think that's true. And, if you were to run, you could learn a lot of this. I mean, I learned it. Yeah. Nobody's born knowing it, right. But it takes time.
Yeah, true.
And it takes bandwidth to be able to learn it. And I think having spent the time already learning it is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's not intuitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't necessarily think that how limited we are here on where you can put roads. I mean, the same geography and geology that draws people to this area makes it really hard to build roads.
Yeah.
And so when there's, I talk about the Northern Corridor a lot because I spent a lot of time working on that issue, but the county has had a plan to build a northern route from east to west for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time and a lot of negotiation with federal land management agencies to be able to build a route. And there are people who don't want a route to go through, but if you don't have a route, then all that traffic stays on St. George City surface streets. Yeah. And that causes a problem for locals, but it's not intuitive if you've just moved here to think the reason these streets are so congested is because of Bureau of Land Management policy.
Yeah, and then to add to that is because it's taken so long, we try to solve it by doing other things. Like there's these other workarounds that are like, oh, well, maybe if we do a road here, this will alleviate this over here. Mm-hmm. But what ends up happening is that it degrades this longer term plan, and then development fills in the gaps and doesn't go where you really want it to go based on where this road plan is, right? So development ends up filling in to these places that you don't necessarily, you wouldn't have wanted it previously, or, you get houses where you wanted commercial and now you have commercial where there was going to be industrial, and, you end up, mixing up, you have this 20-year plan for the city, but because roads are so important to moving, the people movers, that delay, I think, causes like this echo effect within the community, right? And so,
and normally you don't want the federal government involved in any of those decisions. Yeah. Your zoning decisions, your transportation planning, all of these city planning decisions usually should be made locally, and you don't want the federal government involved at all.
Right.
But we don't have that option here because you're always dealing with the federal government.
Yeah.
The municipal areas are totally surrounded by public land. They can't grow without impacting public land. And even the growth that's already here, if you're maintaining a power line, it goes across public land.
Yeah.
So you have to go through this permitting process to be able to replace poles or lines that normally that is just strictly a municipal decision, and you don't have to get the county and the state and the federal government involved. But that's not the world we live in.
Well, one of the points going to the budget side of things and your perspective on budget, walk me through, because I think there needs to be a rebalancing of powers from the executive branch and the legislative branch. So you talked to me a little bit about, or you talked to us a little bit about your budget belief.
Yeah.
Where do you think, when we talk about slashing the budget, right? Because we have to have massive spending cuts.
Yes.
Or we have to raise taxes by a massive level. It's one or the other. You either increase the revenue or you decrease the spending. I for sure do not want to give the government any more money.
That's not the answer.
That's definitely not the answer.
More taxes.
That's clear. Yeah, that's clear the answer. And it doesn't matter where you fit on your belief spectrum. We're mismanaging the money all the way at the very top. So take me through what are your thoughts on that?
So what I keep talking about, because I think it is a really good idea, is taking the statutory authority that every agency has. So the executive branch agencies exist because Congress created them. Congress delegated authority to the executive branch to do something. Mm-hmm. And they did it through a statute. So there's a law out there that says this agency exists to do this thing. Over time, agencies grow and evolve. They want bigger budgets. They want bigger missions. They keep creeping outside of that statutory box that Congress gave them. So I think the quickest way to cut spending, and I've been really careful on the campaign trail to talk about things that I think are possible. It's easy to talk about the way things should be and get really wound up, but I want to talk about things that I think are actually possible in this Congress. I think this is possible. So what I want to do is look at those statutory authorities, compare it to what the agency's doing, and defund anything that doesn't match up.
Can you give me an example of one?
Sure. So the Bureau of Land Management just released a conservation rule. Their mandate from Congress is to manage land for multiple use. Conservation rule, not multiple use. It's very controversial. A lot of people don't like it. Congress needs to say no funds shall be used to implement this rule. It goes away. They can't do it if they don't have funding. Mm-hmm. Some of the more controversial examples are, and I use these a lot when I talk to people, like if you're upset about the FBI labeling parents as domestic terrorists for going to school board meetings, you should be upset about it. They don't have the authority to do it. Mm-hmm. So Congress needs to go in and use the budget power to say no funds shall be used for that program. It's not something the FBI has the authority to do. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be paying for them to do it. I also talk to a lot of people who are upset about school curriculum. They don't want kids being taught things in school that are offensive to their parents. Well, parents and state and local school boards should be making those decisions about what's taught in school. The Department of Education doesn't have the statutory authority to tell them what they have to teach, so make it clear they can't spend any money on it. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think it's doable, I can, when I talk to people about it, they really respond. People like this idea, but there's always some hesitancy of like, yeah, but if it was that easy, why hasn't it been done? I think...
Or the thing that jumped out of my head is like, okay, you say you can't use it for this, but could you use it for, could they use money to do something else with it? Does it actually cut their funding, or it just says, oh, I just can't spend this money on this thing, I'll go spend it over here?
Both. So Congress can do both things. And that is a fair question. I get asked that a lot. Like if you just shrink their budget and say now they can't do it.
Or you shrink the number of things they can spend the money on. They just spend that same amount of money on less things, right?
Yeah.
But they still spend the money.
But Congress has the authority to actually go in line by line in their budget and say what they can do.
Okay.
And so I want to do both. I want to shrink the budgets and say line by line what they can and can't do with the funding.
I like it. Okay.
And the reason I think it's possible is because, one, it's not that radical. People always talk about getting rid of agencies. Mm-hmm. And then when they go to do it, it fails because there is some statutory authority. The agency was created to do something. Right. And so to
get that to go away, you'd have to take it to the Supreme Court, right? You'd have to challenge.
Congress could repeal the authority. It just hasn't happened traditionally. So we swing for the fence, we don't get it, and then it's kind of dead. What I want to do is just put them back in their box. It's much less controversial.
Shrink the box.
Yeah. And it's Congress defending Congress's authority. It's the legislative branch doing their job to be a check on the executive branch. Right. And I think everybody agrees right now that the executive branch is too strong.
Yeah.
And I think even Democrats agree that the executive branch is too strong because even though they traditionally have liked agencies and liked the bureaucracy, they're scared of a Republican president exercising executive authority. So I think the interests are actually aligned. And the Supreme Court has been signaling for a year and a half now that they think the executive branch is too strong and that they're not willing to be as deferential to agencies interpreting and applying and
taking liberties,
enforcing their own laws.
Yeah.
So it feels to me like the time is right. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of factors that are coming together that make it so Congress is probably actually ready to do this. So I want to get in there and make sure we do.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about, because I'm looking at the time, I'm like, okay, what do we going to dive into? Outside of the budget, what would be two of your other, there's typically like, hey, there's these three big rocks that I want to move and that I'm committed to doing in representing District 2 for Utah at the federal level.
Yeah.
I know there's lots of different things we could talk about, but what else outside of the budget? Because I think that's got to be a huge one. What else do you find is something that you really want to drive home?
So usually I say the three things I want to address are inflation, spending, and overreach.
Okay.
But really, they're all overreach problems. The government's just too involved in our lives. Mm-hmm. So, we pass these huge government spending bills, like the infrastructure bill. Mm-hmm. It's outside the appropriations process. It's additional spending, and it makes the inflation problem worse. We're pumping these federal dollars into the economy, drives the prices of things up. It doesn't actually make people better off. It just makes things more expensive. So.
Well, and then they fill it full of pork belly stuff that has nothing to do with actual infrastructure stuff, right? Like they end up spending money on things that are not in any way, shape, or form actually going towards building infrastructure, right? They fill these things
But
up.
the term is pork barrel. Let's not disparage
pork belly.
Pork belly is delicious.
Pork belly. How many times have I said that? I probably said that a dozen times wrong.
I just want to defend pork belly, which is
I'm so glad you told me
an American staple.
It makes you feel better. I'm extremely hungry, so I appreciate that.
Maybe that's why I said it. Maybe pork barrel. Not pork belly.
Yeah.
Pork belly politics. It sounds like pork belly.
It does.
Anyway.
I probably should have just let you have
that.
No,
that was so good. I'm so glad you said it.
But yeah, it becomes a Christmas tree and everyone wants to hang an ornament on it, right?
Right.
So we just need to stop those bills and not be spending all that extra cash. That addresses inflation. It also is an overreach problem. And we're spending more money than we take in. Mm-hmm. That's a spending problem. It's also an overreach problem. The government doesn't need to be trying to solve every problem. We don't need the federal government to fix everything. In fact, the federal government usually does the opposite of fixing things by getting involved and makes it worse.
Yeah.
So there's that. Those are kind of my three rocks. If you want three rocks, that's usually what I say. But I also want to make clear, like, your member of Congress votes. They vote on big national issues. They get scorecards on that. Like, that's usually what people look at. It's easy to go look at, how did someone vote and what's their scorecard? And that's important. And you should look at that. Mm-hmm. What's a lot harder to take credit for, but is just as important, is showing up for these local issues. Is, picking up the phone when the county calls and says, hey, we've got bureaucrats who are trying to throw up roadblocks for the Northern Corridor. We need your help. Mm-hmm. Showing up for that is just as much a part of the job and just as important. It's a lot harder to quantify. Mm-hmm. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes bandwidth, and you don't get headlines for it. You don't get the credit for it. And so to me, one of the reasons I'm running, maybe the main reason I'm running, is because I care about these issues. I'm a solid conservative on the big national issues, but I also want to make sure we have somebody who's keeping an eye on these other issues that probably shouldn't even be federal, but you need your federal representative to show up for them and to support your local governments.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I like to talk about because it matters. And it's not what people always think about when they're thinking about what they want in a representative.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I hear a lot of we talk about water a lot, and I know that right now the state's vision of water down here in southern Utah is we have to just do what we can control, because right now the Lake Powell pipeline is something is out of our necessarily immediate control. So we're a lot of that's falling at the state level. As far as the agreements, like the water. There's a pact. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the
Colorado River Compact.
Yeah, the Colorado River Compact. So there's some reorganizations in how they're supposed to execute the distribution of water. Right?
They're renegotiating the protocols.
Yeah, they're renegotiating those things. Does the federal government have any say in what that how that goes? Is it just interstate? Would you as a state rep or as a federal representative have any participation in that at all?
I don't think Congress should have any participation in that. So water is primarily a state issue. With the Colorado River, it runs through 7 states. So there, are 7 states involved in it. But the states are negotiating the protocols. And that's the way it should be happening. And Congress should stay out of it and let the states negotiate, right? And then ratify the agreement.
Okay, got it.
That's the right way for this to happen. It's tough to keep Congress out of it because it's easy for people to think that they have all the answers to everything. And this is a sidetrack, but that is one of the things when you're looking at who to vote for. It's one of the things you should pay attention to. Do they know what roles belong to this office?
What's in their lane and what's not?
It takes discipline to stay in your lane, but it is important to stay in your lane. We don't need members of Congress weighing in on every state issue or weighing in on issues that belong in a different branch. It takes understanding and discipline to know what's in your lane and to stay in your lane. And you're only accountable for the things that are in your lane. I'm going to vote on federal legislation and I'm going to show up on local issues that have a federal nexus. If I'm weighing in on other things, I'm just throwing weight around that I shouldn't be throwing around. And that discipline is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I know we got about 7 minutes left.
Ooh, this went fast.
I know it goes fast. We get sidetracked on pork belly. No, I'm just kidding. Jeff, do you have a question that would jump out? Something that you're interested in? Because
yeah.
What do you got?
Celeste, you kind of answered it before, so this is kind of maybe a little bit personal, just because I'm not necessarily native to St. George. Rob isn't either, but like we're gonna be natives because
our plan is stay here forever.
Yeah, we want to be here forever. So you kind of answered this question. So just from a biased perspective, I personally think it would be super cool to have a representative in Congress that has a keen interest in Southern Utah.
Yeah.
How do you think, I mean, you talked a little bit about the Northern Corridor and, some of the municipal stuff with, like power lines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do you think, as compared to maybe a congressperson from Northern Utah, how do you think that could help us down here locally?
Well, so I've been working for a congressperson from Northern Utah, and I think he did a pretty good job on these issues. He also hired me because I was down here and had been working on these issues. And I want to be clear. I think it's really important that whoever represents this district represents the district as a whole. It is a big district, and pitting north against south or rural against urban is a mistake. But I do think we have a unique opportunity right now to have somebody represent this district who doesn't live within 30 minutes of the airport. And as far as representation goes, there are 6 members of the Utah delegation. 5 of them live on the Wasatch Front, and they do a great job, and that's great. Having one that lives in Southern Utah, I think is actually a really cool opportunity. It does bring a different perspective. When you have to take a connecting flight to get to Salt Lake, it changes the way you view issues. And I'm not unbiased on this because I'm the Republican nominee and I live in Cedar City. I clearly have a dog in this fight, but I think it is a really cool opportunity for Southern Utah to have somebody who goes to bed at night down here.
Yeah. I think it's important a lot of people don't realize this, but we're the 5th largest, St. George is the 5th largest city in the state.
Yeah.
And we don't have other metros to support us, right? So you look at the other, top 4, and then you look at 6, 7, 8, 9, right? You look at all these other ones, they're surrounded by other large cities. They're all connected. They're all connected. Yeah. We're disconnected, right? Yeah. And so not only are we a large city, but we're also completely independent in a lot of the things that we're having to do, right? As far as managing our airport, right? And our energy resources, right? We have basically one set of power lines that comes from up north down here. If that goes out, we're in rolling blackouts. Thanks to St. George Lori Mangum for forecasting, foreseeing, hey, this is probably an issue, right? And we've done a good job investing in that. We could do a better job at investing in that, but we are unique in that, and having representatives down here, I think, is super important. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Jeff. As far as the other candidates, it seems like they're not from here. I know there's you haven't lived here in Southern Utah recently because of the work you did out in Washington, D.C. Knowing what you know about D.C., I think there's a competitive advantage in here, but I would like you to state why that because you've been there and understand some of the ins and outs of DC and how to collect coalitions and how to get things moving forward. How is there value in that? Because truthfully, the first thought I had when I had heard you work for Chris Stewart, I was like, well, I kind of want an outsider, right? There's something to be said for draining the swamp.
Sure.
Like that that thought process, I can see how, especially after looking at the age of all the congressional members and how they've all been there a long time. You know, at first I was like, well, if she's part of she's an insider, but you're not really an insider.
No, if I'm the swamp, we're doing really well because I've spent most of my adult life in St. George, Cedar, and Beaver.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm really connected to this district, but I think this is a similar answer to the one I gave earlier about knowing these public lands issues. Somebody else could learn them. I mean, it's you could go to Washington, D.C. and learn the ropes. But the reason it's an advantage that I've spent time there and I have done work there is that I do know the ropes and I won't take as long to get my feet on the ground. I'm not going to have to go to Washington, D.C., and then start building relationships with the county commissioners, and then find out that the Northern Corridor is an issue, and then get smart on the Northern Corridor, and then go find out where it is in the bureaucratic process. I already know. So the day I get there, I can put that pressure right on to make sure that this is moving. And there are dozens and dozens of other examples like the Northern Corridor that I've been working on that are issues that local governments or local people have said, we need help with this. The federal government's getting in the way. And I can get right to work on those same issues instead of taking the time to find out what the issues are and who I need to talk to. And that's an advantage for the constituents. It's an advantage for the counties, for the cities, for the district.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, if I'm between the ages of 18 and 25 or 30, give me your thoughts why it's important that they vote right now. Like from your perspective, because one of the main drivers of this was to grow voter registration to that 18 to 25-year-old. You know, we're on Instagram. We post a ton trying to reach that age demographic.
Yeah.
What's your message to them directly? And we got 2 minutes before you got to jam.
So it's their futures on the line. I mean, we're talking about inflation. They're the ones who can't afford things. They're the ones at the lower end of that earning spectrum. We're talking about overspending. They're the ones who are going to have to pay off that debt. We're spending their future. And
at trillions of dollars. We're talking trillions of dollars. It's only going on their shoulders.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
And I know it's uncomfortable. Like, it wasn't that long ago that I was that age. And I know that they don't like to show up at caucus and get yelled at by people their parents' age. Like, I know that there's sort of a barrier to entry. And so hopefully things like this, having a podcast, having things on Instagram, make it more accessible so that young people feel like they can get informed and get involved without having to sort of run into this wall of like resistance from people who are older than them and act like they don't know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, get out to vote. Good luck on the campaign trail. I know you got a long 4 weeks ahead of you, and then there's general election after that you're gonna have to tackle. So, best of luck to you. Thanks for coming on. I know you got a busy schedule. Have a good day.
I appreciate the time and the forum. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.